Trouble looks to be around the corner for Graham Potter. West Ham struggling and getting torn apart by Estebao and Chelsea. João Pedro and Rory Delap. Not Rory Delap, his son, Liam. Liam Delap. Both playing. And it's changed sort of my opinion, actually. Daniel, obviously, I'll come to you first, Trent, but do you still feel like Chelsea are one of the best, if not up there, in terms of attacking prowess in the Premier League? Can they actually make a challenge this season?
I think they can. I think the ambition for me and I think others that I've spoken to, other Chelsea fans, is I think for me the big thing is points gap to the eventual champions. I don't think Chelsea realistically will win the league this year. I think that you'd have to get a lot of variables have to come together. Like Liverpool would have to falter quite substantially.
This is sounding like
Man
a cop out. This is sounding like you don't believe
No,
it's
no,
possible.
I the historic reference I've given this year for Chelsea is 13-14, which was Jose's first year back in his second stint, where it was a whole like thing. He was doing like the little horse quotes with Pellegrini, and I won't mention what happened at Stamford Bridge with Arsenal that year, but it was that year when I think we ended like 4 or 5 points off the eventual champions. And it was so clear at the end of that year that Chelsea needed a goal scorer and they needed a creative midfielder. And we sorted those two things out and then we won the title. I think to go from where Chelsea haven't competed seriously for a Premier League title in nearly a decade. Like the gap to the champions has gone up to like 30 points in the last 6 or 7 years. I think Arsenal, just historically, I think the closest a team has gone from like being like nearly 20 points away from the previous champions and then actually going close to win was Arsenal in 22-23 under Arteta. So it's a hard thing to do in 1 year. I think Chelsea have in some ways are taking a little bit of a gamble in the sense that, you look at the production of both Noni Madueke and Nicholas Jackson. Not world class, not outstanding, but I think dependable, and the potential of them to get better. And I think for both of those players potentially to be gone by the end of this window, I think you're banking that Esteval, as you mentioned there, Liam Delap, Joao Pedro, Cole Palmer, the whole, basically the array of attackers we've brought in or already have will make up for that loss and will actually improve on it. So far, it looks very encouraging. I mean, Joao Pedro, I fear saying this because it sounds like a really like dramatic statement, but I don't think I've seen many better introductions and debuts at Chelsea in terms of like their first starts. I mean, other than the Palace game, the 2 games at the Club World Cup, he scores 2 in the semi-final. He chips Donnarumma in the final. And obviously against West Ham, he was just incredible in that number 10 position. So he's been brilliant. I think Delap has a lot to offer. So I think there is at least optimism. I just can't sit here and honestly go, I
You
think
can't
Chelsea are going to
commit.
win the Premier League
I'm
title.
disappointed. I'm disappointed. You spend a lot of money, and
No, we
looking
have
at
spent a lot of
one of the
money.
best. And it's not just about the money, but it's about the options, and how many options
Mm.
we can get through to make this right. You could literally got Spain's starting left back.
Yeah.
We have a keeper who he does shock and amaze at times, or just leave your jaw dropping. But he was player of the tournament at the Club World Cup. You've got João Pedro, who's made a fantastic start. You've got the starlet from Palmeiras, the best that we could find in Brazil. Plus you got World Cup winners, and next to him, arguably the best in the business at his job. So I'm wondering, what is it that you're missing to commit to we are in the conversation, because you're champions of the world.
Mm.
Can you be champions of England, little old
I
England?
I think the difficulty is, I think it's that historic kind of thing about Chelsea of not being in that title race. You think about Liverpool, they went close a few times before eventually winning the title. Man City have always kind of been up there. So even with a disappointing year last year, you kind of think if things click back together, there's history and kind of experience within that group. It's I think that's psychologically, I think for Chelsea fans, I think that is it. Like I think it's the we haven't been in a title race for so long. So it's kind of like it's going to have to happen at some point. But I sort of look at the stability maybe of other clubs as well, and kind of ponder again. Chelsea, you've got to add in as well Champions League football, a young squad that hasn't had Champions League football, especially in this format. We're still very unsure how the Club World Cup fatigue is going to set in, and maybe this is going to be the case for Man City as well. Like it's a complete unknown. Although these footballers will play international tournaments, I think the Club World Cup in itself is kind of an unknown, and basically the non-existent preseason Chelsea had. I think what if I was to sit here and tell you this is how Chelsea can win the league, I think it's the wave of momentum and the depth of options that Maresca has, and his rotation has to be like nailed on point week in week out, mixing in the Champions League, and all of those players rise and outperform um, to the best of their ability. That is what's and I also do think Levi Colwell's injury is a blow. It is. I think I would have been much more confident if Levi hadn't have got injured on the eve of the season because he was getting into a groove of exceptional form.
Kim, what do you think about Chelsea's chances without Cole Palmer involved?
I spent a lot of time last season, I think from September to December, saying that Chelsea are in the title race, and it didn't go particularly well for me. But I think you make a good point there. Like they've spent a lot of money, and they've spent a lot of money for quite some transfer windows now, and it doesn't really seem to make sense that they would be out of the question. I think the only thing is that it's probably slightly young side, but it was last year, and that's what everyone said last year, didn't they? They said like, "Oh, well, Chelsea are playing really good football, but it's a bit young. It's a bit of a young side. We need Maresca to embed his ideas. We need the players to really learn how to play together." But they did do that last year. You came fourth in the league. You got Champions League football, which is what you wanted. Then you went away and won the Club World Cup. And whatever you want to think about the Club World Cup, it was an unusual tournament. Like I don't know how much I can take from it. I watched a lot of the games. It was an odd tournament, let's be honest. But these players, especially like João Pedro, as you mentioned, has just come in, and the first thing he's done for Chelsea is become a world champion, which is going to be on your shirt for the next 4 years. Like we probably disrespect it in this country a little bit, but I can tell you for a fact that if a Brazilian team like Flamengo won the Club World Cup, that would be the biggest thing that would have ever happened to them. So it is quite a big thing, and I think if you can win that, there's no reason why you can't win the Premier League, especially if everyone stays fit. But as you mentioned here, I think the fact that Palmer's not been at his best form. I don't know what the stat was, but I saw something about non-penalty goals. It's been like many, many games,
I
hasn't it?
think
Like
it's like
20
one
odd
or
games, I
two.
think.
Yeah, it's. I think exactly. I think it's maybe one or two since about January time.
That's
So
not
yeah,
good enough from your star player. That is the truth. It's not good enough from your star player. But I do think, let's be honest, I think the way that you can get over that is just by getting a little bit of confidence. And I'm pretty sure that if he was playing against that West Ham side that you played on Friday night, I can guarantee you he would have got a goal. He would have got something. And I think you can start building from there. But I think you've got a young and exciting squad. I think the problem is that if you want to say that Arsenal are in the title race, which most people will, they've been doing it for the last 3 years with pretty much the same squad, and they've been challenging with the same squad and the same manager. Liverpool did it last year. City have been doing it for the last 4 or 5 years. So you're coming up against three teams who are more experienced at being in a title race, players and managers. So that's probably the only reason why you're thinking to be a little bit less confident than I think you should be, because I think actually on the pitch, you've got just about as good a team as the other three teams.
yeah. It's not the games against Arsenal, City, Liverpool that I'm concerned about. Because I think pound for pound and what Maresca can do tactically against those teams, I think Chelsea can step up in those games. My concern is what Arsenal, Liverpool, and City have been so good at, and I think it's probably good to turn to Arsenal and Liverpool before we wrap up, because I think that's a very fascinating game this early on into the season. But the it's that clinical kind of cold mindset that every single week you go and bag 3 points.
Yeah.
Um, I think that
Like
there is,
drawing against Crystal Palace at home on the first game of the season
yeah.
isn't what champions do, but scoring in the 87th minute against Bournemouth to win,
But that's the thing. It's like Chelsea have been at times good at times when the lights are on and it's a night game at Stamford Bridge. But then when it's home to a low block at Stamford Bridge and the excitement isn't really there, and the players kind of have to rile themselves up because it's not one of the historic rivals, you kind of that is where, for me, Chelsea have to be significantly better if they want to be reaching 80 plus points, because that's how you have to do it. You have to be kind of clinical and robotic about it, and that's, you know, the best Chelsea teams were at times they'd lose to Arsenal, they'd lose to maybe Man City, Liverpool in one-off games, but you bet when they play Burnley at home, you bet when they play, I mean, last season we got, what was it, 1 point against Ipswich out of 6. You know, that to make the jump, you have to, and it sounds simple. It's like, well, why can't this team of this quality do it? But you have to do it. I always think November to sort of March is where you find out about a team. It's
I
like
think
that
the
meat of the season, and it's whether you can be clinical when it's nice, it's warm weather at the moment, but it's kind of that, you know, classic bulk of the season where I think teams like Arsenal, even though they haven't won it, have proven capable of going the distance, or at least putting themselves in a title race.
I do agree. I do agree. I think what you've got this year, though, is, as Hugh mentioned right at the beginning, is that you've got options. You've got different styles of play to suit different teams. Like, you come up in one of those winter games you're talking about, Wolves away, is a cauldron, but you've got two super pacey wingers who can just fire the ball into Liam Delap, who we know is really physically strong and really physically capable. And then you've got the more intricate players who you can play, like your Cole Palmers, your João Pedros, in behind when you're coming up against a low block and you need a little piece of magic to unlock it. I think you've got all the right ingredients there to be a title challenging team. I think the goalkeeper's a problem. I'm surprised that you're not going for Donnarumma, to be honest. I don't know why
Not so sure about
why no one's
Donnarumma.
talking about him. But
I
but
think
he's a good shot stopper, isn't he? Like, whatever you
he
think
is.
about his
Me
ability
and
with his
Louis have
feet.
had this debate, and I understand it. For me, Magnon was the one earlier in the summer. But I mean, again, it's sort of going into real inside baseball about Chelsea, but it's like they've sort of backed themselves into a corner with the goalkeeper situation because
Yeah.
they've got Penders on loan, and I think they think that Penders is going to be like a Courtois kind of situation where he goes out on loan, he comes back, and then he becomes the first choice. So I think they've sort of backed that, despite the flaws of Sanchez, which I think will be there across the course of the season, the marginal gains that you could make from Donnarumma with our style of
Yeah.
play are not sufficient enough and not substantial enough that let's just wait a year and then we've got this guy waiting in the wings who's going to come in and be the goalkeeper. And to be fair, I mean, Sanchez has improved a lot in the past, because Chelsea mindset, it doesn't feel like last season even ended. Like, basically the last three months or so, it feels like he's got a lot better.
We could do a Donnarumma.
Right. Well, let's move on from the goalkeeping situation. Well, from one goalkeeping situation to another, actually, because there were a couple of fascinating moments with a certain Mr. Trafford in the Manchester City Tottenham game. Yet again, coming unstuck. This time, Thomas Frank at the helm. What do you think of Thomas Frank so far, Kim?
Yeah, I'm really impressed. I am really impressed. I don't think anything on my social media will hide from the fact that I was a huge Ange Postecoglou fan. I really liked him, and I thought it was nice that he could bring Spurs a trophy after so long. And I thought maybe that would have got him the respect he deserved to stay. But even having seen them against PSG and seen them the last couple of weeks, they just dispatched Burnley, and they outfought City in every single possible way. I don't know if that you can hear that police siren.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
that
going
was so loud.
after
I
Ange.
couldn't even hear myself. I couldn't even hear myself think. But now I'm super impressed. I think that, like, I don't know why anyone else didn't pick up on the João Paulinho getting for free on loan. I don't know why anyone else hasn't done that. He was absolutely sensational. And I think what Thomas Frank's done is the opposite of what Ange Postecoglou's done. They seem really, really, really solid at the back. They've got a lot of pace at the back. We know that. So they're going to be very, very difficult to break down anyway. They've got a lot of power there as well. And they just seem like a really good, cohesive unit very, very, very quickly. And I think a lot of us probably thought, what are Spurs going to be after Postecoglou, because he probably did a bit of a number on them, especially confidence-wise. I think the last 3 months of the season, it was very clear, and it worked. It obviously worked, so you can't really criticise him too much. It was very clear that he just completely sacked off the Premier League, and all he cared about was winning the Europa League. But that ended up meaning that Spurs lost 22 Premier League games. For those players who've come into that club, come into, maybe not historically in terms of trophy, but come into a big club. They've got a huge stadium in London. They've got lots of fans around the world. They would have been so excited to play for Spurs. To then end up a season losing 22 games would have massively knocked their confidence. So I think what Frank's done, coming straight in, changing the style of play and it working so effectively, so quickly, is really, really impressive. It might not last. We know that these honeymoon periods happen, especially when players come in and they have a purple patch and managers come in and they have a purple patch. And although you can say going to the Etihad is really hard, but it is Spurs. That is just what they do. This might just be an outlier, and we'll see when he comes up against an Arsenal or a Liverpool whether he can tactically outwit them as well. But so far, genuinely very impressed.
The fixture list is looking quite gettable right now for the next, I would say, 6 or 7 games. However, yeah, they have been quite impressive at the back. I'm not sure that it's as free-flowing or as finished as it will be at the front, and there is a little bit of me which, expects that it will fall away or drop away.
Yeah.
Sooner rather than later. But
they haven't got great options up front, have they? Really?
I think that's where the problems lie, or potential problems anyway. And have they moved for a Maddison replacement?
Well, they did, didn't they? But unfortunately, it goes the other side of North London.
He's been waiting to pull that one out all show. Literally.
It's been another rocky transfer window for Tottenham, but a great start, and currently one of 3 teams in the league with a 100% record, and 2 of them are playing each other next.
Yeah.
So
I've got to talk about City quickly. I've got to have a quick rant. Just let me land.
Yeah.
Let me land. I'm sorry. After that game, I was so excited to go back to the Etihad. I thought after the Wolves game as well, I thought it's been pretty obvious actually since last Christmas when City bought in Omar Marmoush. That was a not very Pep Guardiola signing. To then back that up with Aït-Nouri, Ryan Cherki and Reinders, again, not really Pep signings. It was clear that we were going to try and change our style of play. Bought in Pep Linders, bought in Kolo Touré, very, very conscious of pressing really high up the pitch, quick on the transitions. It was clear that we were going to change the style of play, and it worked against Wolves. That on the weekend was super disappointing. And I think I looked at it and I looked after the game, and you guys can help me here because maybe I'm being too emotional. And by Christmas, maybe this conversation will be null and void because we will have seen more of Ryan Aït-Nouri, we will have seen more of Reinders, and we will have seen more of Ryan Cherki, maybe. But I look at that City team, and as I mentioned before, the expectation with Manchester City is to win the quadruple every single year. The expectation, given how much money we've spent, given the fact that we've got the best manager in history of all time, is to win basically every single game. And I look at that squad and I think, okay, our main competitors in the Champions League, you're looking at Real Madrid, Barcelona, Bayern Munich. Arguably, there's a couple of other teams. In the Premier League, you're looking at Arsenal and Liverpool. Out of those 5 teams, you look at City's best starting 11. Who gets in their team? Rodri gets in if he's fit. Haaland probably gets in if he's fit. And John Stones, in my opinion, gets in to all of those teams if he's fit, which he very, very rarely is. That's 3 players. You will probably disagree about John Stones because I know a lot of people do. So let's just say the 2 players then, Rodri and Haaland. Who else would get into Liverpool's team at the moment? In my opinion, no one. Same with Arsenal, same with Bayern, same with Real Madrid. 2 or 3 years ago when we were winning the treble, there weren't many players from any other team who would even touch that City squad.
I don't think he knows his team, does he? He doesn't know the starting 11 yet.
But I think he's been let down. I think the transfer window has been really, really poor. I think since Haaland, we haven't actually bought anyone that good and we've spent a whole lot of money. I think Marmoush will be really good. I think it's unfortunate that he's being pushed out onto the left-hand side because that's not his best position. But we spent £60 million on Nico Gonzalez, which seems like a huge waste because we could have just waited this transfer window and bought in a Morgan Gibbs-White who would seem to fit the style of play that we're trying to go for way more than a Nico Gonzalez. We bought in Jeremy Doku, who is he's just not very good, and that's fine. He's an okay average Premier League player, but he's not very good. And I don't understand why we're buying these caliber of players. This transfer window could have gone so differently. We had the option of getting Morgan Gibbs-White, who was one of the best top 3 midfielders in the Premier League last year. We had the option of getting Rodrigo, who's won however many Champions Leagues with Real Madrid, scored loads of goals, assisted, been one of the key cogs to their most successful period ever. And we've just lolloped through the transfer window again and again, and we're ending up with a squad that I genuinely do not think is good enough to win the Champions League or the Premier League this year. I don't know if I'm being too emotional, but do you look at that squad and genuinely think, oh my God, there's so much quality there, as you do with the Liverpool or Arsenal teams?
I mean, personally, I think there's enough quality to definitely be in the conversation. You've got, I don't know, the Premier League record goal scorer. You've got prodigious new Egyptian, however much million signing. Not important, but he scores goals. You got literally the player of the year from Serie A last year. You got the highlight reel king, Cherky, who I don't know whether Pep can believe what he's not doing, but is an incredibly talented footballer. I'm not going to have it any other way. Like whether he fits or not, whether he hits the ground running or not, irrelevant. Like he's a very talented footballer. Oscar Bob, who at times looks like Messi. Obviously he's not, but
what I'm saying is you're comparing these to the players who are on the other teams. You're comparing Oscar Bob to Mo Salah and Bukayo Saka. This is my point. Everyone has improved so much, and there's so much quality in the league. And I do actually feel like the last few transfer windows have left us a little bit far behind, which is why last season we played the whole season with Bernardo Silva and Gundogan.
Marmoush and Haaland are not too far behind any other combo, any other double. They're both
they don't really play
talented. They're goal scorers.
But neither of them can play at the same time in their preferred position. Or Pep just.
But your question was, do you look at the squad and think it's good enough? I'm going through the men man for man, and they are all elite talents. They're all elite. They all play for their country. They start for their country. John Stones gone to semi-finals of World Cups. We are talking about serious. The only guy I actually see is the weakness in the squad, or two guys actually. In that starting 11 even, I haven't even got to the bench. Rico Lewis, who looks completely out of his depth right now. I don't know what he's trying to do to the guy's career, but he's just being used as a placeholder in a position that he obviously hasn't dealt with in the market or isn't satisfied with. Nunes, who's even that, I don't know how or what's going on there. That looks sort of unfinished, but I think that's more about the squad and him not knowing his best lineup.
But why not move for a right back? It's so obvious. Your two options are Rico Lewis and Mateus Nunes, both centre mids. And I know it's worked in the past. I know it's worked in the past. We got 100 points with Fabian Delph at left back. We won the treble with Nathan Ake at left back. I understand that. I understand that Guardiola finds certain ways around it, but I do just think that this is probably the best the Premier League's ever been. And I do think that the transfer business that we could have done, like the fact that Gundogan's still there, the fact that a lot of these older players are still there. Akanji is still there as we speak. Nathan Ake is still there, who's really injury prone. These are players who Guardiola very explicitly said at the beginning of the window, we don't really want these players to be here. We want to streamline our squad. The fact that these players are still here, it doesn't breed me with any confidence. It seems like there's a bit of a disconnect going on between what Pep actually wants and what the club are willing to do at the moment. And I do feel like we're left in a situation now where we are a couple injuries away of basically starting a midfield with Nico Gonzalez, who is untested, Bernardo Silva and Ilkay Gundogan. And we saw how that worked out last season. We lost 11 out of 12 games from like October to December.
I'm hearing your panic. I'm hearing what...
It's too early.
I think what last time we spoke was actually like some quite positive energy after the Wolves win. To suddenly it's like it's all fallen apart, and
it's too early, and I don't want to be reactive.
It's too early,
but But I'm just looking at it, and like the performance. I don't care about the result. Like we were always going to lose to Spurs. That's fine. We always do. The performance just stunk of last year. It really
I
did,
would
and
be
I
worried. I
appreciate.
would be worried, Ron. I think there is a sort of mythical identity that the media have been labeling City with that they don't actually have. Like they used to control games. They no longer do that. He's trying to be, I don't know, much more direct or, not really caring about possession as much as times. And it isn't the City that I recognise, and I don't think it will be. I think that personally, I actually think that they are more than capable due to the sort of individual quality of still being there or thereabouts. But essentially, they're short. They're short because, the others in Liverpool, Arsenal, and even Chelsea, who are really beginning to sort of know themselves and what they're capable of, they have shape, they have structure, they know their roles. And here, it's a little bit all over the place to me. Obviously, we're early doors.
Super
You're
early.
panicking probably for no reason. But I do hear you, and it is almost sort of the opposite of what is happening at Arsenal, who turned up guns blazing at Leeds United or at the Emirates. I actually don't think Arsenal played that well, but still managed to score 5 and continue to be the sort of corner kings. However, some great goals as well, including one of a brace for Victor Gyökeres. What are you making of the Yok so far, Daniel?
I think, yeah, it's obviously big when a player comes in, especially with the narrative around what this Arsenal team lacks. And if you don't score at Old Trafford, that's the one that people are going to be focusing on, and there's obviously big hype and big pressure about it. But I think there is a bit of nuance within this game that I sort of looked at what Daniel Farke said before the game, where there was obviously talk about the lack of height, and then Arsenal really exploited that. But in the case of Gyökeres, yeah, I think it will take a bit of time. Um, I think he has to probably become used to, especially within Arsenal's system, and maybe the first goal from him kind of goes against this, but it reminds me a little bit of when Lukaku came to Chelsea, the not the first time, the time he came from Inter, where he started off amazingly and it was kind of doing all the Lukaku things he'd done. And the longer he remained at Chelsea, it almost felt like the system kind of dragged him down a little bit. And he kind of became this sort of battering ram that Chelsea would have to hit off. And when you see Gyökeres, especially with the first goal, you think it'd be a real shame if he's just resigned to be someone who stands in the centre of the 6-yard box. I mean, he could do that, but if you've watched Gyökeres at Sporting Lisbon, that's kind of simplifying his game. So I think marrying that with Arteta's system, when you've got these wide players, Saka, Martinelli, Madueke, who I think could play off the left as well, because he did it briefly but quite well at Chelsea. It's how that's all going to work out. But for him at home, it was a big win. And yeah, I mean, Arsenal, the way they've been able to master set pieces is a huge. We started this show talking about people having a go at Newcastle's direct football. Well, it shows you that stuff percentage wise makes a huge difference over the course of a season, and it's something that Arteta, even when things aren't going that well, can consistently rely on, which makes them a real threat in every single game.
And they've just added more threat to their game. Eze, fresh home, making his return with a sensational video that brought a tear to the eye. Are Arsenal actually now themselves are in a position where they have to win? Odegaard and Saka sort of injury doubts, so I'm not really sure what's going on there right now. But with Eze stepping in, do you think that they are capable of going all the way, Kim?
I still think you're a little bit light. I think it's an unbelievable signing, by the way. And yeah, you are right. Even as someone who doesn't want to see Arsenal succeed, obviously, because we're a natural competitor, that video did actually give me goosebumps. That is probably the best transfer announcement video ever. I absolutely love that, and I'm really happy for. I am happy for him. Like, he's such a great player, and I think it genuinely is a superb signing. But I just think you're still a little light. You're still 1 or 2 injuries away from having not that great a team. I think probably your best 11, I think, is the best 11 in the Premier League. I think you've probably got the best defence all across the back four, including the goalkeeper. I think your midfield with Zubamendi, the way he's playing at the moment, Declan Rice as well, Odegaard when he's on form, and then the front three as it stands of Gyökeres, Eze and Saka, if everyone's fit, I think it's an incredibly strong 11. I do just think you're a couple of injuries away. I think if Gyökeres gets injured, you're in the same position you were in last year, where you've got Kai Havertz up front and you're crying out for a real striker. We saw there was a big dip in form when Saka got injured last year. Maybe not so much in results, but still struggled quite a lot. And I just think Arteta again is in a situation, and I said it last year, and I feel like you're in a situation which is slightly different from City, even despite what I've said, and Liverpool, which is that I think Slot and Guardiola can tentatively go for both the Champions League and the Premier League. I think because you're slightly lighter, I think you're in a position where Arteta probably has to decide which one he wants to go all out in, especially when it comes to that sort of February, March, April period. I think if you stay injury free, I think you've got every chance. But I do think still probably a slight lack of depth in the squad. I don't know. What do you think?
I just think we've got more depth than ever. I mean,
Do you think it's enough though?
we're bringing in more depth. Even more is coming. We're not done in the window yet. Apparently, being heavily linked to an Ecuadorian international from Leverkusen, Piero Hincapié, who would add further reinforcement down the left-hand side especially. And that would really help with Eze, who's probably going to be over on that side quite a lot of the time, I think. So I'm feeling positive about things, which is so strange during a transfer window. I'm sure you guys are much more adept at dealing with this constant barrage of like new players, but loving it. I feel like we've sort of reached the big time, and we're now playing. We're sitting at the same table in the window, which is, it's refreshing to say the least, because the house that Wenger built really does deserve us to splash the cash and actually go for things as opposed to just being involved. So it was great to see goals, to be honest, after the United game. Obviously, we touched on Max Dowman and how impressive it is for these youngsters who are just, they don't even have bum fluff yet to be involved and actually just smashing it on the biggest stage of them all. And he looks so special. It's quite frightening, actually, how good he is. I don't want to jump the gun here, but technically, he's better than most Premier League footballers. Am I out of order for saying that?
It's too early to say.
Yes,
But he
probably too early.
really good.
I'm this is, I don't know. I'm a visionary. All right.
Yeah.
I can see from the touch. One touch drops from the sky. You got one chance. It's your big moment. You're 15. The ball's just dropping from the heavens. Maybe the sun's in his eyes. I don't know. But this touch is silky. Is now won 3 penalties in 4 appearances, 4 substitute appearances.
I was at the game against Bilbao, was it? Bilbao or Villarreal? I was at both of the games. When he came on and he won the penalty, he does look like a seriously special talent. And he's obviously so young that you have to be very, very careful not to overexpose him to too many games, especially when his body's still growing and all of that kind of thing. So it's like very exciting to see a player like that, but it's probably best off the less we see him, the better it will be for his development. I don't think he can just be playing every single week in the Premier League. I also think that part of what makes him so special is something which may eventually get lost, which is just the exuberance of youth. He doesn't have any of those hang-ups. As soon as he gets the ball, all he thinks about and all he cares about is taking players on. And probably because he hasn't been around the first team setup for a huge amount of time, that's probably what Arteta is telling him at the moment. I think once he gets older, once he gets in and around that first team, he'll have a lot more things to think about, defensive work, all this percentage play of when to take players on, when to pass it back, and all that kind of stuff. And I'm not trying to poo-poo it. I'm just trying to be a bit realistic of what will most likely happen is that he's exploding onto the scene at the moment, and I think he'll probably fade into the background a little bit before coming to the fore again. But he does look absolutely unbelievable. And I'm not going to lie, like for a 15-year-old, he's physically stronger than a lot of the men in the Premier League at the moment. He's a big, imposing figure. He's not like a tiny little child. He didn't look out of place at all when you watch him on the pitch.
I do just think
too.
on him, I think the good thing is there are senior players around him that are going to take that pressure. So there is that, that chance for him to come on later in games and kind of express himself. And I also just kind of think from an Arsenal point of view, I do agree with you about the depth thing, because it kind of felt for periods of last season that it was basically Saka. And if Saka isn't on the pitch and he ain't playing well and he ain't producing, it becomes very evident what Arsenal want to do. They want to switch the ball from left to right. And if you can shut down what Saka does, and then obviously he got injured, there's a real lack, especially from the bench. I think I was speaking to an Arsenal fan on a podcast about Madueke over this summer, and he was sort of saying that, like, you get to 60 minutes and then Arteta looks at his bench and it's like, what do I do? There's no one really there who's going to come on and change the game. And when you've got someone like Dauman, when you've got Madueke this year, and other options, it just hopefully, a bit like Chelsea, right? You go from Saturday to Wednesday in the Champions League, and there's a bit more depth and rotation that hopefully makes a player like Saka a bit, if he's not injured that bad, is a lot fresher for some of the more important games. So you don't want to go too overboard with a youngster, right? Like, I'm always hesitant to do that, because especially in the social media age, and then if he goes to Anfield in a week and he doesn't play as well, what is everyone going to turn around and go, well, you see, not that good? It's like, no, like, he's 15 years old, right? Like, it's understandable he's going to have setbacks, but listen, we're fans, right? Like, you're entitled to be excited. What's the point of being here if you ain't going to be excited about players? So
I think you're both gravely underestimating how good both Dauman and Rio are. I think they're both going to play a part. They're that good. They're seriously, to me, people will say I'm jumping guns and whatnot, but there's only a small difference between them and Jamal's. Opportunity to play is part of that, and shooting is probably the other part of that, which is huge. But
I suppose
technically, they're on such a different level that I don't think either of them, have ever played at their own age group. They're used to being there, and they are good enough. We are going to see that this season.
But there is a player who you mentioned earlier who was 17, 18 years old, came into a Manchester City side and was integral to winning them the treble, which was Rico Lewis. That was his burst on the scene. He came in at right back. Basically, Pep Guardiola has said that what Rico did in his positional sense taught Guardiola how to play that inverted right back position, which then John Stones adopted for the Champions League final and got man of the match in. That's the level of talent we're talking about there. And now you're referring to him as one of these players who is way out of his depth, and you don't know what Pep's doing with his career. So
he does look way out of his depth right now.
No, exactly. Of course he does.
And I feel like he's being thrown to the lions.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. But this is my point. There are players who burst onto the scene and they look like absolutely exceptional talents, and then football takes over, positional sense takes over, and tactics and analysis take over, and then they become not what they are, which is why I'm always a little bit cautious to just throw caution to the wind and say, this guy's super special, this guy's super special. Seeing Max Darman in the flesh, I know it was only Premier League, a pre-season game. He genuinely did look completely different from any other youngster of that level I've seen. I don't think has there ever been a 15-year-old in the Premier League before?
Ethan Ranieri.
And let's be honest, Darman looks better than Ranieri. In kind of no, he just looks better
right now. I think Ethan's got more goals in him personally, but this is the thing. Ethan is
it's a good problem to have.
They're essentially like they're on a very similar trajectory, and you know, I think he's at a good club to be able to do it. It's quite beautiful. You know, we were talking earlier about the Manchester United record of having academy products in your squad, or just having an academy product in your squad, but to have Lewis Skelly involved with Nwaneri, Saka, and obviously we've got incoming academy products. It's a good time to be alive. Listen, we're going to wrap it up. It's a pleasure talking to you all. If you haven't already, please do like the video, subscribe to the channel, get involved in the Fresco stuff. Yeah, we're here, we're active, and we will be back soon. Love to your mothers.